the immediate question, is the government shutdown over? The answer, yes. The federal government has reopened after a record-breaking stoppage, but the resolution is only temporary, the underlying conflicts remain, and many Americans and agencies still face fallout. The pause of government operations was not just a procedural hiccup, it created disruption across federal agencies, services, and households. This matters because government funding underpins vast parts of the economy, hundreds of thousands of workers, and many public services. The timeline of events. The shutdown began on October 1, 2025, as the new fiscal year began and Congress had not passed full appropriation bills or a continuing resolution to fund many agencies. The House and Senate, dominated by Republicans in one, Democrats in another, failed for weeks to find a compromise. On November 10th, the Senate approved a funding compromise, and on November 12th, the House followed with a 222-209 vote. The President signed the legislation later that night, formally ending the shutdown after 43 days. This marked the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. The three key steps, Senate passage, House passage, presidential signature, finally aligned to reopen operations. What the stopgap funding accomplishes. The enacted bill is essentially a continuing resolution. It funds most federal agencies at or near current levels until around January 30, 2026. It reinstates pay for federal workers who were furloughed, keeps most services operational again, and prevents mass layoffs or large workforce reductions until the temporary funding runs out. However, it does not settle major policy fights. Critical items like the extension of certain healthcare subsidies were left out. In other words, the government is back up and running, but only on borrowed time and without a permanent settlement of the underlying issues: who was impacted and how. The human cost was high. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees were furloughed. Estimates range from about 670,000 to 900,000, and many more continued working without pay. Key services were disrupted. National parks and museums shut or operated in limited fashion. Regulatory reviews and grant processing slowed. SNAP food assistance for low-income families was threatened. Airports experienced staffing and logistical issues due to gaps in funding for aviation oversight. Federal contractors and small businesses reliant on government payments faced cash flow stresses. Though the funding bill promises back pay for impacted workers, the delay and uncertainty inflicted real hardship, economic cost, and expert estimates. According to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO, and other analysts, prolonged shutdowns impose measurable, partly irreversible economic damage. In this case, estimates suggest the U.S. economy might suffer a permanent reduction of perhaps $7 billion to $14 billion or more in real output, depending on duration and spillovers. One analysis puts it at about an $11 billion permanent loss. Lost paychecks, delayed government purchases, unmet contracts, and deferred investment all contribute. While some of the lost output will rebound when funding resumes, a portion is never fully regained, underscoring the cost of budget standoffs, the political conflict that triggered the shutdown. The standoff was not simply about spending totals, but about policy, especially the fate of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, premium subsidy extensions. House Republicans pushed a funding bill that excluded those extensions. Senate Democrats demanded them. The Senate's compromise included a promise of a vote later, but did not guarantee the subsidies. Partisan blame quickly mounted. Each side accused the other of holding the government hostage. Public polling showed growing frustration with congressional dysfunction, and analysts warned the political damage could linger into future election cycles. Expert perspectives and reactions. Union and workforce advocates emphasized the toll on employees, missed paychecks, anxiety, morale damage, and uncertainty about future employment. Economists stressed the broader cost: lower consumer spending, delayed hiring, increased fiscal uncertainty, and negative confidence effects. Some economists noted the risk of repeated shutdowns. If funding battles become frequent, businesses and individuals may adjust by reducing investment and hiring, increasing the long-term drag on growth. Government officials and some lawmakers portrayed the reopened funding as a victory, but many observers cautioned that the victory is fragile and incomplete. What happens now? Immediate effects of reopening. With the signing of the funding bill, agencies began reactivating operations. Furloughed workers were to return, and back pay provisions were triggered. Programs suspended or threatened, such as food assistance benefits and regulatory review, began the process of restoration. But operational lags remain. Agencies must catch up on delayed work, contractors must resume halted projects, backlog will build. In sectors such as aviation, hiring, training, travel delays may not instantly vanish, and businesses and families that adjusted to the disruption may take time to recover. In short, the government is open again, but recovery is gradual. Unresolved risks and potential future shutdowns. Because the deal is time-limited, expiring in late January 2026, and left major issues unresolved, e.g., the ACA subsidies, the risk of another funding showdown remains. If legislators delay again or use shutdown threats as bargaining chips, the next funding cliff looms as the nation heads into an election year. Strategic analysts warn that such repeat shutdowns will raise the long-term risk premium for U.S. governance, reduce confidence in federal institutions, and amplify economic uncertainty. The question now is not simply was it reopened, but will it stay open? Longer-term implications for governance, workforce, and economy. Repeated shutdowns weaken the federal budget process, impair agencies' ability to plan, and increase the cost of borrowing and operations. For the federal workforce, morale and retention may suffer. Skilled workers might leave rather than tolerate recurring funding instability. The economy absorbs structural costs, small businesses tied to government contracts suffer, and consumer, business confidence takes a hit. Politically, the event may become a voter issue. Who gets blamed may impact midterm and 2026 elections. The overarching conclusion, the shutdown's end is not the end of its effects. In summary, yes, the government shutdown is over in the sense that the funding stalemate has been resolved for now and federal operations are back on track. But it is a temporary reopening, not a full solution. The core policy disputes remain unresolved, and another clash is very likely unless Congress reaches more durable agreements. The economic damage is real and partly irreversible. The human cost was real and acute. For workers, families, businesses, and agencies, the return to normal will take time, and full confidence in governance remains shaken. As a viewer or citizen, what matters now is watching how the next funding round plays out. If it is handled with more stability and less brinkmanship, the crisis window may finally close. But if politics revert to repeating shutdowns, then reopening will simply be a pause, not a resolution.